Can the Chiefs keep getting away with it? They did it again. I'm going to tell you right now. They are going to get away with it until somebody stops it. We'll talk about it here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good Monday morning to you. Welcome to Locked On NFL. I am the host, Tony Wiggins, the barber here in the barbershop, where twice a day Locked On NFL brings you all the top stories from around the NFL with the use and help of local experts. Tyler Rowland in the morning and me right now in the barbershop this afternoon here. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Prize Picks. That's right. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Also, make sure you tap in wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch them or hear them, and go on over to Amazon Music and check out Locked On NFL on Amazon Music. Here's what we're going to talk about today. The bad get worse. Who are we talking about? I'm telling you, there's some bad teams in the league, man. We're going to talk about the Bears. We're going to talk a little bit about the Jaguars and then the Titans also. The Bills get a reality check in L.A. Something about going to L.A., man. That's not easy, especially when you're playing, late in the afternoon, and both of those teams can score points out there. And we saw it yesterday. The Bills, even though Josh Allen had an MVP performance, they lost. Chiefs can't keep getting away with it. What am I talking about? Winning when they should absolutely lose these games. We're going to hit all of that. We ain't going to bury the lead anymore. We're going to get right to it with the help of my expert for the day, Julian Council, Locked On Carolina Panthers, Locked On Panthers, as well as Locked On NFL. Julian, the Chiefs did it again.
Yeah, they sure did. And at no point in that game did I think they weren't going to get it done, because this apparently is just who the Kansas City Chiefs are this season and have been since Pat Mahomes showed up 5 years ago.
I'm just sitting here wondering, at some point, I thought it was yesterday. I told my wife, I said, baby, that kicker, I've seen that kicker before. He used to kick in Jacksonville. You see how soft that ball is going up there? There's something going to happen. And it hooked. It hit the upright. And
Doink.
It bounced in. Normally, the doink doesn't go in when it hits it the way it hit it. But it went in, and then the Chiefs were like, oh, we won again. We won again. I know the league is getting absolutely – the people around the league, the audiences are getting absolutely tired of it. And my man Chris Clark even sounds like, can't believe it happened again. Listen to Locked On Chiefs.
The doink heard around the division. Kansas City wins. They win the division for the 9th straight season. Matthew Wright kicks the ball off the upright, kicks it through, doinks the uprights. Huge win for Kansas City. This means they win the division. They're now a game and a half up on the Buffalo Bills because the Buffalo Bills lost. This is a huge win for Kansas City. They're in the driver's seat. They have to go 3-1 in the last 4 games to get to a point where they would be the number 1 seed in the playoffs, and they absolutely need it. They need the rest. They need to get healthy. Kansas City did not play well. They started the game off. They struggled on third down. That's one of the things we're going to talk about here in just a moment on the podcast. But overall, it was just not a good performance by the offense. They struggled keeping Mahomes upright, and that is going to be a big problem. They've got to get it figured out, and they lost DJ Humphries to an injury during the game. I'll be curious to see what we find out about that, and we'll have much more coming on Locked On Chiefs shortly.
So for most of the year, the Achilles of this team has been the offensive line and how quickly Patrick Mahomes has to process things, because he's usually on the run. And then his receivers, even though they've added to it, it just seems like something is missing as a whole within the offense. But I think it's bigger than that. It just seems like they just don't have their identity offensively. And maybe it is because the line is the way it is.
Yeah, the line, the injuries to the wide receivers, I think all that plays a role into why they have not looked as crisp offensively this season. But it may not matter for them at this point in time when you look at it. With Buffalo losing on Sunday, who beat them a couple weeks ago, like that's a 10-3 Buffalo team. Kansas City's now sitting here at 12-1, 2 games ahead of Buffalo. They get the Browns next Sunday on the road, or I guess, is that, next Sunday. They win that game, and, well, it looks like they're going to have home field throughout the playoffs, unless they find a way to trip up in the final couple weeks against a Texans team that has not looked as good as we thought they would look this season. They have at the Steelers, at the Broncos. Like, you beat the Browns, and I think that they're very clearly going to be the number 1 seed. And going to Arrowhead, it might catch up with them there, but I don't think it's going to catch up with them this regular season based off of just like the schedule ahead and what they've been able to get away with at this point in time.
And then they could just flat out catch fire and get it right offensively. Remember, they won last year with their offense struggling. They didn't score a whole bunch of points in the playoffs, and their receivers couldn't catch the ball all last year, and they still won a championship. Now, you're going to have to beat them jokers, man. It's like an old championship fighter. You think he can be bruised up, scarred. You're going to have to knock these jokers out of commission. And one of the teams that everybody thought was the Buffalo Bills, who Chris Clark did mention, they did lose a game yesterday. And this is a dose of reality for me with the Bills. The Bills, in my opinion, have lost 2 games to where they didn't stop anybody. And that was against the Rams yesterday. And then it was against the Baltimore Ravens earlier this year when they got ran up and down on the field. See, when you lose 1 game like that, I'm not concerned. But when you lose 2, it does start to concern me. And I'm a little bit worried about their defense. And here's what Joe Marino had to say about that.
The Buffalo Bills experienced a rare December loss, falling to the Los Angeles Rams 42-44, dropped to 10-3 on the season. They do remain the number 2 seed in the AFC playoffs. It's been a while, but not a victory Monday here on Locked On Bills. A very disappointing loss for Buffalo. An unserious effort by the defense, special teams blunders, coaching blunders, and we should be talking about and celebrating a heroic and all-time and elite and exceptional performance by Josh Allen, but we're not. We're talking about how that was spoiled here in this post-game reaction.
Hey, man, great game by Josh Allen. It is not going to change the MVP. In fact, it probably enhanced it a little bit. But in the back of a lot of people's minds, and me, I'm a lot of people in this, it did kind of change the perception because now I've seen something happen twice. So that means it's not an anomaly. That's kind of who they are defensively. That concerns me a little bit when you're talking about getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think he's clearly going to be the MVP at this point in time, unless Saquon Barkley, who had a great game against Carolina on Sunday, just goes bonkers over the next couple of weeks. And I think Josh has a chance. He's got the Patriots twice, the Jets 1 time. They do have at the Lions, though. Yeah. And you know how I feel about Detroit being the best team in the NFL. Showed it again on Thursday night with that win against Green Bay. Just saying. If they go out to Detroit and give up 40 points again, then there probably is a serious issue for Buffalo. And like, that's a game I would expect them to lose at this point in time. And I would think they'd win out the rest of those games. So that's then looking at what a 13-4 Buffalo Bills team. They're going to be right there with Pittsburgh to try and get that 2 seed. And if Pittsburgh somehow finds a way to win that division, Buffalo's going to be going on the road for that divisional round potentially. And that I don't think is ideal for them. I think they're a team that's certainly, like KC, the way Kansas City's played this year, getting away with it, really needs those home games. And there's still deficiencies on that roster based off of all that they lost this offseason. And that's why Josh Allen's in position to be the MVP, because he's carried them to this point anyways, despite what they've lost. But I really feel like they need to be playing at Highmark Stadium for at least 2 games if they're not going to be the 1 seed, and for them to have a chance to even be in that AFC title game and potentially go to a Super Bowl. So very important game coming up next week. No,
it is an important game. The thing about the playoffs that people have to realize, things get condensed a little bit, right? And there's a very micro approach to and it's all about getting on and off the field on 3rd down, converting 1st downs, kicking game. All of those things come into a factor, and we've seen so many playoff games when it comes down to elite teams. We've seen the little things matter. So hopefully Buffalo can get some of those things cleaned up. Kirk Cousins didn't clean up the way he should have in his return back to Minnesota, and we expect that. A little voice down through the AFC or the NFC South, where I let my man Julian tell me what is going on with Kirk Cousins. We're also going to talk about the surprising charges. We'll do that all in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. If you studied them in high school like me or you're playing around, you probably need a little bit of a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced, so you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deep with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register. hillsdale.edu/locked-on. And today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's why you need to check it out. You can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards during Pixmas and offering 2 free picks in December. This week, I'm looking to see if Travis Kelce can help the Chiefs in their offense by getting more than 70 yards. And Lamar Jackson, I think, will go over 250 in next week's game. Download the Prize Picks app today, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Rolling along here on Locked On NFL with Julian Council of Locked On NFL and Locked On Carolina Panthers. Talked about the leaders, the Bills and the Chiefs, and what they did on Sunday. Now we're going to hit Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. I always got to talk about Kirk Cousins, man. So much was made with how they acquired him and the money that they gave him and the Michael Penix situation, being drafted by Atlanta. Well, this time Kirk was going back to somewhere where he was very familiar, where he made a lot of money and passed for a lot of yards while in Minnesota, never really won nothing or anything. Now that's kind of what he's doing in Atlanta, with the exception of lately, he's not even passed for a bunch of yards or touchdowns. Listen to Aaron Freeman talk about yesterday's game.
Self-inflicted wounds proved costly for the Falcons in their grip atop the NFC South. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. Self-inflicted wounds and coverage breakdowns were the difference in the Falcons' 42-21 loss in Minnesota in Week 14. 12 penalties for 127 penalty yards was the most in the NFL this season, as well as 3 turnovers were the difference. The Falcons were able to keep it close for 3 quarters with a 21-21 tie game going into the fourth, but then things got out of hand with the Vikings capitalizing on 2 fourth-quarter turnovers to blow this game out of the water. Kirk Cousins played better, but he'll still get heat for 2 bad interceptions in this game. And with a Bucs win, the Falcons are now in second place in the NFC South at 6-7. For more coverage of whether or not the Falcons will continue choking or bounce back, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yeah, Council, I think in the words of Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons, they're going to keep choking, because I think the Bucs now are applying pressure and they're going to win the division. They're the best team anyway in that division.
Yeah, it's not a choke job when you're just not a good football team, and that's what Atlanta is, not a good football team. And you look at the rest of the schedule, the Raiders aren't good either, and that's a team that they should be able to beat. But would you be surprised next Monday night if Atlanta loses this game? No. The Giants game should also beat them. Would you be surprised? No. At Washington versus the Carolina team that's taken Philadelphia, Kansas City, and Tampa to the brink the last 3 weeks. Yeah, man, I'm kind of concerned here about not just Kirk Cousins. What about Raheem Morris?
Yep.
They spent a lot of money for Kirk, and this was expected to be the team that was going to win the NFC South this year. And they're sitting at 6-7. And it would not surprise anyone at this point in time if they finished off 7-10.
Yep.
And if that does happen, is he a one and done in his second opportunity? I know, like, you got all the reporting about Bill Belichick wanting to potentially take the North Carolina football job there in college. He talked to the Falcons. That was the only team that would talk to him last year. I'm wondering if Arthur Blank is seeing those headlines and thinking to himself, man, I messed this up. Maybe I call Bill and get something set up for potential he comes in next year. Like, I'm not trying to put Raheem Morris on the hot seat. I just know that these owners are irrational and they are not willing to wait. And if you have this kind of collapse after that kind of investment, you may not get a second year and a mulligan to try it over again. Because if it doesn't work this year and it doesn't work next year, well, that's probably going to be it for Raheem and that entire staff down there in Atlanta.
It is. And the thing that gets you fired, the thing that gets the one and done thing fired. And I always say this, when you see a coach, and it's almost like when Ed Hockley, I used to love when Ed, my wife and everybody used to, my grandmother used to say, he explains things so well. Or, you know, whenever there was a play. So one time, Ed Hockley, the referee, longtime official, is explaining a bad call. It was a game between the Chargers and the Broncos, right? And when he had to actually explain that he screwed up, the crowd booed him. And as of that point, every time Ed Hockley went to make an explanation, nobody wanted to hear anything. Raheem Morris is a very good speaker. When you hear Raheem Morris, you want to run through a brick wall.
Yeah.
But when that stuff doesn't work, when whatever you're talking about doesn't work, the last thing I want to hear from is you. And I think what happens is when you have a guy that's that charismatic and then this runs into a wall, okay, what's his other go-to? What can you do after just talking about it? And then when your team has more penalty yards in a game yesterday than any team all season, see what it looks like will get you canned, Julian. And that's the thing that I'm worried about with Raheem Morris, because this looks just like his other situation. It looks the exact same way. Started out okay, and then all of a sudden they started fizzling down the stretch. I'll tell you who I do like, though, the Los Angeles Chargers under Jim Harbaugh. And this is no surprise because I've been a big Jim Harbaugh fan. Jim Harbaugh doesn't do anything like really fancy, like when you see all of these dudes that come from the Shanahan tree with all of this misdirection and scheming up, they just line up and play football. And even in a loss last night, they impressed me against the Chiefs. Here's what my man Daniel Wade had to say after last night's game.
The Chargers were so close to getting that first statement win under Jim Harbaugh in Arrowhead, but once again, it slipped through their fingers. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, and the most disappointing part of the Chargers' 19-17 loss to the Chiefs is just coming so close and coming up short once again, this time literally having a ball doink off the upright and in for the game-winning field goal as time expired. But for the Chargers, they were unable to overcome getting shut out in the first half offensively. They scored every single drive in the second half and were still unable to win this game. Hopefully, they can take some positives away from some things they figured out in that second half with no Ladd McConkey, but the defense, man, they were masterful. They did so good, but on that last drive, we're just unable to come up with a big play on third down to get them off the field and secure the win. But Chargers come up short once again, and they'll have some work to do to ensure a playoff spot. But for the full game breakdown, make sure to follow the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Julian, I ain't going to sit here and drag you through Main Street of moral victories, but I will say this is about as close as it comes to getting a moral victory when you take a world view of the Los Angeles Chargers franchise, like where they came from to where they are now to potentially where they could go under Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and I wonder how many teams out there that hired coaches are regretting not hiring Jim Harbaugh. There was no projection with Jim Harbaugh. He was a sure thing. He was going to win games and take your team to the playoffs. You look around the rest of the league, Tennessee sitting there at 3-10, Las Vegas 2-11, Carolina 3-10. Even though I don't think David Tepper and Jim Harbaugh would have meshed anyways. You look at Seattle 8-5, Mike Macdonald, who comes from the Jim Harbaugh tree, doing pretty damn good so far. So most of these teams that hired these coaches, Atlanta, Raheem Morris, second time around, 6-7. Most of these teams that hired a new coach, other than I guess Washington 8-5, who had gotten a second opportunity, like the guys you're looking at, Dan Quinn, Raheem Morris, who we just talked about, who've gotten at least second opportunities. They're doing a lot better than these first-time head coaches who are failing at their spots currently. Well, Jim Harbaugh, a known commodity, has gone to Los Angeles, and he's got the Chargers, I think, in position to make the playoffs, and maybe they can win a game in the playoffs. I don't think they're going to be win a Super Bowl this year or anything like that, get to the AFC title game, but possibly they could get a first-round upset. So I just wonder how many of these owners now are looking back at it thinking, man, instead of being enamored by the Bengals OC, why? Oh, because he worked up Joe Burrow, who's outstanding, and Jamar Chase. Like, are you sure it's not just the players that actually are the reason he had all that success, or was it him? maybe look at the guy who's actually won everywhere he's been and clearly was the best option on the market this past year.
I think it sets up well, and this might be behind the veil a little bit too much in the NFL, but I think the work of the scouts and the X's and O's football coaches, I think is being brought back to the forefront a little bit, because when you look around and we keep talking about Dan Campbell and Jim Harbaugh, what are all those dudes have in common? Vic Fangio is just old school punch you in your mouth football. And Bill Belichick, we're still bringing his name up because it's pretty much the same thing. And now Mike Vrabel might get him another job because teams are turning the clock back and going with old tried and true blocking and tackling in pro football. All right, we talked about good football the first couple of segments. We're going to talk about some bad football, but we'll do it in a funny way here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. That's right. Get ready to tackle the rest of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Julian, let's go through purgatory real quick. I call it purgatory because it seems like that's where bad football teams just go and sit dormant. We're going to watch this Caleb Williams thing very, very closely for the rest of the year. Even though I don't think there's a coach on that staff that's going to be coaching them next year, I still think what they do or don't do to and for him for the rest of the season will help continue to shape how he plays. But yesterday was a very, very bad game against a banged-up 49ers team. And Lauren Cox, for Locked On Bears, tells you just how bad it was.
The Chicago Bears really didn't put up much of a fight against the San Francisco 49ers, showing us all that firing Matt Eberflus couldn't solve all of this team's problems. I'm Lauren Cox, host of the Locked On Bears podcast. And it was about as ugly as you could expect from the Bears against the 49ers. No coach firing bump rising all tides here. We thought Thomas Brown would come in, provide some new energy, fix some of the things Matt Eberflus had done wrong, and this team would go from losing close games to winning. But instead, it felt like they went backwards against a lesser opponent compared to the NFC North foes the Bears had played so closely, and yet we're left trying to pick up the pieces once again for a team that's in absolute freefall and no real solutions in sight. And by the way, a bunch of really good divisional opponents still coming up on your schedule. A lot to break down on the Locked On Bears podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts.
Julian, they're a terrible team right now, and it goes to show you, you can go out and get all these skill guys all you want to, man, but if you don't have a positive plan with good sound trenches and then have a plan for that quarterback, this thing could go off the rails real quick and the Bears might end up picking in the top 5 again.
Yeah, a couple things based off of what Lauren said there. They didn't play well. They took a step backward against one of the lesser teams compared to the NFC North opponents. They played the Niners. And I understand that San Francisco is likely not going to make the playoffs. They still could, but it's the 49ers, dude. And the Bears are a lesser team. They're a terrible team. Also, Thomas Brown was here in Carolina last year, a part of that Frank Reich offensive staff that did a terrible job with Bryce Young. Now they had a lot of issues with the offensive line injuries, the lack of talent on the outside, other than 33-year-old Adam Thielen. But this is not a guy who's a great play caller at all. And I know they had the NFLPA survey they put out there every year ahead of the coaching searches and players name who they really like as their coordinators. And he was named as one of the top 3 coordinators in the league, which shows how much the players respect him. And this is not to say that he cannot be a good head coach, but if you were expecting that things were going to change offensively for with Thomas Brown as a play caller, you obviously weren't paying attention. I get why you would not pay attention to what happened in Carolina last year, but you're completely unaware. And then people who think there's going to be a bump because the head coach gets fired, firing a head coach does nothing but make fans feel good for like a week. And then it's back to reality of your team is ass. And the coach obviously had to be removed in that situation. Yes, because Keenan Allen saying the players did enough to win the game. He's got to go right then and there. Totally understand that. But it does not change the fact the players also cannot get it done. So it's just always a fallacy to think, oh, everything's going to be great. I know Rizzi's won 3 games in New Orleans. Still not going anywhere, folks. They're still not going to be a playoff team this year. So congrats, you won a couple of games. And I hate thinking like this because I hate when people say this, but you just worsen your draft position. So
yeah, I hate it too because people got on me yesterday when I said it about Jacksonville that they worsened their draft position. The bottom line is what you're trying to say is there's nothing that's going to happen right now. Besides, if you're the Bears, the last thing you really want, I'm being honest with you, the last thing you really want is to hit lightning in a bottle with a coach and then have everybody clamoring to keep that coach. That never ever works. The bottom line is I just want my teams to just be honest with me. Tell me the truth about who you are. And the thing about the Jaguars winning yesterday is if you just focus on the fact that they won the game and there are certain players that teams that you kind of been waiting on them because they're draft picks. Mason Smith was yesterday, played well. You don't want this momentum to start building up because then teams will start looking at it like it'll be fool's gold. You'll think you're better than you really are, and they may not want to make wholesale changes. Make no mistake about it, I don't think the Titans are going to change anything, but Tyler Rowland, the other host of Locked On NFL, shows you just how bad, and we did some promo last week, how bad that Jaguars loss felt to the Tennessee Titans.
This is a disaster loss for the Tennessee Titans and, more importantly, Brian Callahan. To me, to lose at home, to score 6 points and look so inept against the Jacksonville Jaguars, a division opponent, it's just unacceptable. And to me, this is the opposite of the Houston Texans win. All the confidence we felt and the happiness we felt and seeing the offense score over 30 points, this is the exact opposite of that. And for all of the good feelings that came with that Texans win, this Jacksonville loss should be equally negative on the other side of it. And this loss was just another reminder of the Titans' huge roster issues. Pass rush, no pressure on Mac Jones all day. Wide receivers, an NWI drop, and nobody can get open all day against Jacksonville's secondary. And then, of course, the offensive line issues. So you add that to coaching and, really a disaster, disappointing loss for the Tennessee Titans.
You just cannot fix things in 1 year. You can't. You've seen it in Carolina. I've seen it in Jacksonville where they ain't been able to fix it for almost a decade other than a year or two. We knew coming into this year that they had a bad offensive line, and Mr. Whoopsie Daisy wasn't that great of a quarterback. And now I think they need another quarterback.
Yeah, well, that's pretty clear. Like, let's be honest with the NFL. Guys with the measurables that look like Will Levis get drafted in the top 5. Yeah. And he didn't. So that should have told you everything you need to know about Will Levis coming out and how he was going to perform in the NFL. Another thing, like we talked about this, I think, a couple weeks ago, anytime a team wins the headlines during free agency, that typically is a bad football team. And you know all about that down there in Jacksonville, all those years they won the headlines. And cool, you got L'Jarius Sneed. That did not help. He did not have a successful first year. The receivers have been an issue since they let A.J. Brown leave. And that is what cost John Robinson his job when Amy Adams Strunk, the owner there, so watched them play against Philadelphia and then overreacted to that. But you shouldn't let him make that decision in the first place, Amy. Step in, be the owner. I guess prevent that from happening if you're going to get upset and fire the guy later on for that being the case. They don't have receivers. Like Treylon Burks did not work out. I mean, when Nick Westbrook-Akine is your number 2 for 3 years in a row, like what the hell are we doing here? Right. And then when they had Nuke Hopkins, let's not act like Nuke Hopkins is still a top-tier receiver in the NFL. He's more of a name than an actual commodity nowadays. Like the Titans stink. And I don't really know what else to say other than like it's not a good team. So Tyler forgot it's a week-to-week league and the team still sucked. But it's we got a big win against Houston. It's the NFL. This thing's can happen. But reality sets right back in, which is why you can never get too high, never get too low. And you got to understand who you are. And well, we got reminded on Sunday, they're the Tennessee Titans.
And the Jaguar fans got mad at me on my postcast yesterday because I said they won, but they still lost because they went from picking 1st to 5th. And I'm not normally the dude either that talks about tanking. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm talking about is enjoy the win. Yeah, you beat your rival, but the bottom line is you beat them. That's like beating a stray cat, dog. You ain't accomplished a whole bunch, and you look.
And there's
terrible
a lot of
doing it.
value for a team. Sorry, there's a lot of value for a team like Jacksonville who already has their quarterback to have like the number 1 pick. Like I don't think Shador or Cam Ward are like worth trading up to number 1 to get, but somebody's gonna do it. Likely,
Somebody's gonna do it.
So find your sucker. That's what
Find your sucker.
If
That's
you have
right.
a quarterback, find your sucker.
You know it. Carolina did it, didn't they? Chicago did it. Chicago found their sucker.
Carolina to be their sucker.
Yeah. They well, we don't need no suckers around here on Locked On NFL, man, because we bosses around here, baby. We come in with it every single day, twice a day here on Locked On NFL. Tyler rolling early in the morning, hitting you upside your head like a double shot of espresso, and me laid back in the barbershop, and we just running down all the big stories from around sports with use of the local experts like Julian Council up in Carolina. And we will be back here tomorrow, same day, same time, like we always are. You guys make sure you take care of each other, and we'll see Julian next Monday here on Locked On NFL.